will be posted later?
So I don't see, well, I guess we just don't have an agenda really well formed, but Quentin sent an email to the list talking about 1.8 planning. He's not actually here yet, but I'm assuming there is going to be time to discuss, at least in a preliminary fashion, what we're going to be targeting for 1.8 or what people want to target.
As far as I know, I don't know, is there any other important business that we need to attend to? This is the review of the stateful sets updated design.
Yeah, I haven't had time to read I've been busy with other stuff. Haven't had time to read the updated federated stateful set. So I won't be able to contribute there.
I got to read it, but to be honest, Irfan, like I was hoping you were actually going to separate the two use cases out. And the fact that they're still kind of conjoined means I find it very confusing to read. Some stuff is relevant for the local stateful set use case and some for the global. And we discussed sort of separating those because they're kind of orthogonal, and so one can certainly be done separately from the other. I mean, is your intent to try to target both of those this cycle?
Yeah, so what I understood from the earlier comment that you gave in the last meeting was that in the use cases, I ensured that one use case is the base use case, which is when you create stateful sets, they are the same local stateful sets created in two clusters. And orthogonally, we build the other use case, which is on top of this, you can have global identities for the stateful sets, or where stateful set replicas can communicate across. That is how I have tried to deal it in the document.
I guess my hope would be is that
so there is
you have one document for each with the intent of finishing them separately. You finish the simpler case and we review it and we merge it. And then assuming there's time, then you work on the expanded global use case and we merge it separately. Like having that in the same document means it's kind of hard to reason about because stateful sets are complicated as it is. And once you have people sort of up to speed on, the simple use case, then I think you're likely to get much better feedback on the more complicated one. But if they're mixed, and then people just have a lot of complexity to try to master. I understand that you understand that complexity, but I mean, take pity on your viewers.
Actually, the first portion of, or the first phase of implementation that I am proposing doesn't propose itself to be that complex. One, and second is that the main point that I am proposing in this design is having multiple identities for each replica of the stateful set. That is the main point of the design. That is additionally we need to implement, apart from just partitioning the replicas of a given stateful set in Federation and putting the same stateful set in each cluster. So it seems to be like separating out would kill this very point.
The whole point of having these use cases separable, though, is so that people can reason about it without having to have all the state in their head. I get that you as the designer and implementer, you understand what's going on. But for other people, we have a lot of other responsibilities. Having to get to where your headspace is challenging if there's too much work involved. That's my sort of perspective. I'm happy to hear contrarian views if anybody else wants to speak up.
You have already read the document, right?
Correct.
And you still think that it has some complexity which needs to be separated out?
I think it could be clearer and more sort of digestible if the use cases were separated, so you could focus on the simple case and you could lay out what's required, and then people could provide their feedback on just that. And then separately, you could ask for feedback on how to extend that design. So it's the foundation, and then you build on top of it. But if you just try to build the whole house at once, it's hard for people to really understand or introspect on what you're trying to do or what you're proposing. Sorry, that's my perspective anyway.
No, I completely get it what you're saying. But from the point of view of what you are saying is that we build the simpler case, which is we have partitioned stateful sets possible as local stateful sets in local clusters. And then on top of that, we say that we can have global communication across also. What
Yeah.
I have,
I'm just saying you can put those in two separate design documents and focus on the complexity that each introduces separately rather than mixing it up. And at this point, like, I will stop talking, and please, other people who have read the document, I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say.
I have read the document. One thing that bothers me about splitting this into separate documents is designing for a simpler case, and we all agreeing that that's the right thing to do, and later we find that that's a dead end. And that's one of the reasons why I think it should be in the same doc. Maybe we need not implement the whole thing in one go, but at least we should know what is going to happen after we implement the simpler case.
So you're suggesting we have to design the entire feature?
No, or at least the important bits. It seems like from the doc, it seems like the global quorum is the important bit.
How?
Yes, that's what I also understand.
Right. The simpler bit is basically a bash for loop with dash context change. So to me, the real meat is in the more complex case.
And one more point to add to that is that there are even more complex cases, as Maru, you are pointing at, which are actually which complexity will be included with the possibility of upgrade feature or stateful set upgrades that is being done right now. So that I have suggested that we will handle in a separate design document, because eventually when we have upgrade in a local stateful set, we will need that in Federation also.
Does anyone else have any opinion?
I mean, I also didn't get a chance to read through the updated version of the doc, so I don't have any direct comments. It sounds like, is there a reason that we couldn't have two designs that just are in separate docs but come out at the same time and are reviewed in tandem? Is it partially just the fact that having everything collected in that one doc makes it harder to digest and doesn't let you, or if you had the same information in two separate docs, it would be more manageable and more easier to reason about? I mean, it doesn't seem like the content itself necessarily has to change drastically, just the organization, or is that not the case?
So what you are saying, Jonathan, that is actually put in as two different approaches or design approaches in it, and the design approach that is supposed to be suggested to use, which sort of builds both these cases, what Maru is referring to together. So as I mentioned, the main pointer or the main meat of the design is that we suggest that a given stateful replica can have multiple identities. Right now it has a single usable identity in locally in a cluster. We say that that identity could be more than one, or more than one DNS identity could map to the same IP address. If I remove that out, then actually there is nothing remaining in the design per se.
Well, I mean, you're laying the groundwork for future work. I think my concern is that I'd like to see a correlation between a feature proposal and what actually gets implemented. And it's difficult to sort of draw those links if there's just a big, huge amorphous doc of everything you could do. And then the reviewer has to sort of interpret like what your intent is when you write code, and has to sort of try to figure out, okay, he proposed all these things and he's implementing just this subset, and there's not really a direct correlation between any one section and what he's doing. That to me is problematic. Like, I'd like to have, like when I'm reviewing code, and I've seen this like over the last cycle, if I don't really have the background, if I don't really have, you know, the rationale for why you're doing what you're doing, and then I see a bunch of code, it's really confusing. I mean, it's hard enough to go through code and deal with that level of complexity, the implementation side, without clear indication from a design document as to the rationale for why you're doing what you're doing. So that's my concern, and I apologize that I'm kind of picking on you a little bit. This is sort of a general statement. I think that it's important that we start focusing more on doing a little bit of upfront design, reducing the complexity so that we can actually reason about the code we're implementing rather than doing all that work on the coding level where we're trying to solidify things, but the foundation, like the conceptual foundation, may be lacking. Does that make sense?
No, as I said, I agree to what you are saying, that there are two separate additional, separate things, so separate use cases which sort of build together. But what I'm trying to say is that the actual proposed design is going to be implemented as one shot. That's what I understand. And it's like correlated. Otherwise, we are going to, if we want only the base implementation, it is like just partitioning and sending across in the way the sync controller does right now.
Right, but that's work in itself, right? Like, I guess my point is, I'd rather see you implement that and then evolve it than try to just do everything at once.
What I mean to say is that that doesn't put in much data or much substance in the document to be put in. It's probably one paragraph, or that's it.
Okay. Well, I mean, in that case, maybe there should just be a focus in the document on the global one, and maybe we don't need a design document to just implement the stateful set, propagate like the simple copying around. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, the first step, or the base, or the first step is like if you want to build the stateful set, you basically distribute the replicas and do a copy of the same object in all the clusters. The next step is what is more difficult and which needs to be implemented.
So there's no special scheduling involved in the propagation? Like, it's just going to match what we do for replica sets, deployments, etc.?
Yes. Yeah, there is a little bit, but what I have proposed in the design is no special what I should say is the first phase, no special handling of annotations and whatever users want to put in and all that. We don't do that.
Okay.
So, typically this is how you do that in a design document, that you're going to lay out, this is what the basic thing is, and this is the final kind of a vision as well. I mean, if you kind of separate it out, I mean, that's the concern, though, that Irfan has, that, it doesn't have enough meat.
I get, Deepak, I get Maru's concern is that he would basically want to map what is there in the document to what gets submitted as the implementation. But my point is that one document might be sufficient, and I can probably put in some pointers or add on data which might say that in first phase or the first PR that will come in.
Yeah, something just kind of reformat it, I guess, that this is what, because eventually you have to kind of lay out the whole design kind of so that not only addresses the current implementation, but the future one as well, like Madhu said, you see.
So maybe what I'm looking for is just a little bit more conceptual clarity, whether you reformat and but to me, like when I was reading it, reviewing it, I mean, I appreciate that you've added more use cases. I still find there's a lot of sort of accidental complexity in how it's explained. And like, if I want to understand it, I really have to digest it more than I'd like to. And that, like I said, I'd be curious if I was the only one who had that feeling. I'm kind of slow, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's not like that. It'll be great if you can just put in a comment of which section you think that is like that. I would probably be focused in that way.
Okay. Okay, so it just sounds like more review is required. So I'm going to suggest, I apologize, but maybe we can just push this to next week. It sounds like other people need to still read the document, and I need to provide more substantive comments rather than it's too complicated, so you can actually respond to that feedback.
Yeah, we can do that. Next week, I might not be able to attend the meeting, though, so it will have to go to the further meeting next to that.
Okay. I mean, I guess that'll just give us more time to actually back and forth on the design in code review.
Yeah, that'll be great. That's actually what I have been looking for. It has been like open. The design has been put there, and it has been out for review since almost 2-3 months now. So I just need a little more focused review for that, and it'll be great if we can do it outside this meeting. It'll save time for most of us.
That must be frustrating. Okay.
Irfan, given that we are actually postponing this design review, I had a question. My understanding from the previous design review was that you would come up with use case and walk through your design for one of those use cases. I saw you had a bunch of use cases, but I did not see a walkthrough. I would still like to see that because
Okay.
like I don't have I don't have clarity basically. I did not still understand, maybe it's just me, I still did not understand how the design maps to running, for example, a real HCD cluster globally, or running a real Cassandra cluster. So taking one example and walking through the design would be great.
Okay, I understand what you mean. That I can do. So I'll update that in the design. My understanding from last was that I basically need to put in some use cases which are possible using this design.
So
Okay.
So yeah, apologies. You haven't been getting the review that you deserve on this, and hopefully I will make a commitment in front of everybody to actually start this week, and y'all can punish me with shaming if I don't follow through.
No problem. But the response might be delayed a little bit. As I said, next week, I mean, for a couple of days, I'm not around.
If you're waiting for months and I'm waiting for a week, I think that's
sure.
more than fair.
Okay. We can go on to the next topics.
So it doesn't appear like, I don't believe there are any outstanding 1.7 issues. Does anybody have anything that was a bug fix or something that was urgent to get in for 1.7? I don't remember.
We have a couple outstanding, I believe. I don't remember off the top of my head what they are, but
okay.
I
saw
think we
several
should probably
cleared.
Yeah, like most of them are gone, but let me just pull up the. We just have to make sure that we actually have people tasked with merging the remaining things or punt them. So we have one, do not add unique label to daemon set. Looks like the tests are actually passing. Madhu, I think you've been reviewing that. Are you able to make sure that gets merged? Jennifer's PR?
Yes, the tests are still not passing for Federation. I haven't checked today morning, but last time I checked, it wasn't. I'm talking to Janet, who submitted the PR. So yes, I'm on it.
Okay. And there's one more, which was add known internal IP as a fallback.
That was last night, so that should merge.
You LGTM'd it. It did not merge, however, because the release note was needed. So he's added a release note, and you may want to review that. It doesn't really look great to me. I'm interested to see your feedback, but yeah. So I think those are the only outstanding issues for 1.7. And I think there's minimal work required, more just procedural at this point.
Okay. I was looking into a bug with rebalancing and deployments yesterday. I did find a workaround, so I don't think that there are 2 issues actually raised in that bug. One of them, there's a pretty straightforward workaround. So I don't think that requires 1.7 work. The other one, I mean, it's an existing issue. I don't necessarily know that it requires doing something for 1.7 specifically, and if it does, it could be something to do in a patch release.
So it's a workaround for the user, but is it a bug that can be addressed?
Yeah, it's a bug. Well, it's a design issue that can be addressed. I mean, we can talk about it afterwards. I don't think it's worth bringing the whole SIG into it because it's somewhat of a minor issue with how the scheduling works.
I guess I view this as, you know, if it can be a small patch and form it into a bug fix, then I would opt it into 1.7. But if it's a design issue, then probably not at this point.
It's a question. We can talk about it. I can explain it, and we can make a decision about that. Okay. In that case, testing updates.
So testing updates, blocking job was re-enabled yesterday for Federation. So we had four instances where the Federation E2E test suite was turned off. Out of the four, 3 of them were because of test infra changes. So there's probably some discussion to be had when we finish releasing 1.7 to at least bring up with SIG release about having test infra make changes while we're trying to get the release out. In this case, it impacted us. So we didn't look good, but it wasn't necessarily our fault. Shashi was helping us debug this over our nights, and then we came in and took it from there.
Yeah.
The other bug was an unfortunate case of a daemon set regression that got in, and it got in. I'm not sure the timing, but I think it might have got in while blocking was disabled because of a test issue. So hopefully, the coming days will lead to better outcome. But the true percentage of the stats that we keep for E2E test suite quality are actually pretty high. I would say higher than 95% if we abstract the cases that were broken by test infra.
Full disclosure, though. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. There was an issue with the federated types E2E test that Madhu sussed out that had to do with Go, the way that Go and Ginkgo interact with the loop variable and for loops and closures and scoping, which was causing us, it appears, to run the same, potentially run all of those in parallel, run federated types test for the same type over and over again rather than for different types. So that is now fixed, which is a good thing. It was causing some issues in the replica set sync conversion, some confusing failures there. That work isn't in yet, but it was causing in my testing, but that is now fixed. So those tests are now running properly. I think that's Madhu. Is there anything else you can think of?
Sorry, I was writing notes. That's it. That's it.
Excellent. What's next on the list of the schedule? Open. I guess at this point, there's not much to talk about with open PRs since we talked about 1.7 tasks and it's the end of the cycle. I imagine we'll start getting more open PRs over the next few weeks. It's too bad Quinton isn't here.
Just to kind of update, Quinton updated the spreadsheet. He created a spreadsheet for all the projects. So we put in all our projects, the Huawei projects in there actually.
You're talking about the planning for 1.8?
1.8, yeah.
Okay. I put in a bunch as well that are probably fodder for discussion. We need to look at the second tab, I think.
I guess, Deepak, you're talking about resource quotas, reading cube resources, and stateful sets.
I think the HPA, so there a couple of them from previous, they were supposed to go in 1.7 and we couldn't. So job controller is another one. HPA was another one, and then the resource quota and four. I think there are 4 or 5 of them. Yeah.
So on the spreadsheet, there's a second tab on the bottom. You're on the first tab, Q17, Q2. There's the second one is Q17, Q3. I don't know who's driving, but it's in the spreadsheet you already have open. You don't need a link to it. You need to go down to the bottom and pick a different tab. Yeah.
Okay. I think I haven't had a chance to go in and add anything to this list. I will add getting the sync controller stuff in for replica sets and deployments, and doing some, probably adding some tests for those and trying to figure out how to make sure that the tests that we have, that they're tested in the right way to help us avoid issues like the bug that I was looking at yesterday for deployments.
So I think a lot of the stuff that's sort of currently in the backlog is still outstanding. And so as part of scheduling for 1.8, we're going to have to prioritize the existing work against the work we want to get done that's new. I've added a bunch of things. We've already started on some of them. I think things like versions queue. I mean, so we have certain priorities at Red Hat to try to productize this. Versions queue is huge. Documented upgrade procedure is huge. These are kind of blockers for us. We can't deliver something to customers unless these are doable. I guess like for anybody who's providing Federation as a service, it's less important because you can just kind of do it internally. But like if we have to provide software that users actually have to manage, then requirements are a bit higher. Mm-hmm. Also, I think I touched on this. I think I might have mentioned to some of you the need for schedule-less propagation of workload types. Currently, like if I have a deployment with 9 replicas and 3 clusters, it'll just spread 3 replicas in each of those clusters. But we have some customers who basically want to create kind of mirrors in terms of how things are spread. So if I have a deployment with 9 replicas, I actually want 9 replicas in each cluster. So when I add or remove clusters, I'm not having to rebalance the number of replicas I expect to match the number of clusters and the number of replicas I want in each cluster. Should be not a hard problem. It's just something I don't think that was really considered up to this point. Another thing we've talked about previously, Nikhil was leading the effort around like Federation preferences, moving away from annotations. Quentin talked few weeks ago, I think, about really like getting people together to talk about this and try to nail it down. I think that's super important because it seems like it's kind of foundational, and all the work we do sort of depends on being able to store preferences that are Federation specific, and whether we decide to use a separate object like per federated object, or whether we decide to have some other way, whether we override the types, as I think Madhu has proposed, and have, you know, a customized Kubernetes type that supports Federation fields. But that's another thing. I think there's a lot of complexity involved, and the sooner we get started, the sooner we have a chance of actually having to make 1.8. A couple of things around auth, which is also very important for Red Hat. I think, Christian, you've asked about, you know, what we do around like supporting LDAP and OpenShift. I've gotten renewed calls for supporting delegated authentication, which I think is what you're talking about. And there's prior art in the form of Service Catalog and how they integrate with external auth solutions. So I think we can maybe follow their example. Having not necessarily, like I don't necessarily think it'll be a huge amount of work. I think it'll mainly be documenting like how to enable the integration that I think the underlying Kubernetes API server supports. And we'll just need to make sure that that support is carried over to Federation. We have documentation around users being able to set it up.
So is this through webhooks?
Probably. I mean, maybe I can provide the service catalog docs.
Okay.
I'll put it in the. I'm just going to paste a link in, Madhu, and you can.
There's a notes column.
Oh, okay, that's good. Anyway, so comment. No. And the other thing was supporting RBAC in the Federation control plane directly. I was discussing this with Derek. The concern was that like the Federation control plane doesn't really support RBAC, like because there's only a subset of the Kube API that it exposes. And if you want to be able to support RBAC, you actually need to be able to enable like creating, updating, deleting, whatever RBAC objects in the Federation control plane, which kind of requires both enabling those types in the Federation API and also controlling their propagation. And I'm not sure. I mean, we could use cluster selector. I think that Shashi had a way of marking things as not federatable as part of his work around leader election. So we'll have to pick one of those. But anyway, like I think this is a very important thing as well. We have customers saying, you know, we want to be able to use Federation. We don't want to give full access to everybody. And it's kind of a separate issue. It's related but separate to how the Federation control plane interacts with underlying, like the member clusters. Because fine, you control access and you give limited permissions, but currently it's like if you have access to the Federation control plane, you have full access. There's no way to restrict what you do that I know. But I could be ignorant. Is ABAC something that people could use in the Federation control plane, or is that, it's not documented if it is possible?
Not that I know.
Anyway, but yeah, so I mean, selective permissions, not just at the member cluster level, but also at the Federation control plane level. And so this is obviously, there's a lot of work items that I'm putting on the table here. I don't expect that this is something that everybody else is interested in, and I'm not asking other people to do it. We do have another Federation resource, hopefully starting from Red Hat's side on 26th in a couple weeks. We have a couple more people who are requisitioned. I don't know when we'll get them. And we have other resources that may be able to contribute. But my goal in 1.8 is to try to have more sort of work items that are accessible to people who have the time to do them. And that'll require kind of laying out what's required in a little bit more detail rather than, you know, individuals just going, I'm going to do it and just keeping it all in their head. It's going to have to be a little bit more separated, which hopefully will be good, because then people have visibility into what's going on, and if they want to contribute, there'll be more options for doing so. Oh yeah. So one more thing. We have had calls for aggregated status. I've been I did a cursory read over of reading Kube resources from the Federation API server. I'm not entirely sure that that document captures the need for aggregated status. It seems to be focused around enabling access to the member clusters via the Federation API, but without really a lot of detail or vision for how users would consume that. And I guess from my perspective, like a user should be able to say for, say, a replica set, okay, show me this federated replica set, and I would see the Kube view, but I would also see a Federation status view, which would indicate, you know, how many replicas are in which clusters. And fine, you know, we can get that via the API, but how does users see that? It needs to be easily accessible, I think. And so I'd be happy to have that folded into the Reading Kube resources proposal, but I just wanted to make sure that that's captured. I think the lack of status or visibility of how Federation has moved objects around between the clusters, I think that's almost a bigger problem than being able to just access resources directly from the member clusters, or at least as big an issue. So that's it. I'll stop talking.
I can respond to the last one there. I agree. I mean, that is definitely, you're not the only one who's expressed that requirement. The current proposal is essentially that it should be possible in the initial version of the API, what you'd be able to do is you'd be able to list all of the clusters, all of the, let's say, replica sets as an example, all of the replica sets of a given name, clusters, including the Federation. And so that is, you know, the simplest way that one could get a view of, you know, here's replica set foo. This is what its status looks like in the Federation. It has, you know, the spec and status as per the normal Kubernetes API. And then in addition, these are all of the associated underlying replica sets with their replica counts, etc., in all the clusters. What we could consider doing in perhaps a future revision is to fold all of that up into the status of the federated object, but that's not in the current proposal. So I guess a question to this group would be, would the initial that I just outlined, would that be useful? And perhaps would that fully satisfy the requirement? Want to not provide that as an initial version and go straight to the more complex version, I guess, which is creating a new API. It would involve different status for the replica set object, which would incorporate all of the underlying stuff. And I don't think that the latter would be consistent with, in the sense that there are other cases, similar cases in the Kubernetes use case where you don't, the status of a replica set, for example, does not include all of the pods that comprise that replica set at the moment. You need to do a separate query to find all of the pods with the matching labels, etc.
I kind of lost you at that last statement.
Okay, so there are numerous objects in Kubernetes, forgetting about federation for the moment, where there is an object in the API, for example, a replica set, which has a bunch of underlying objects. In the case of a replica set, those are pods, which are not visible in the status of the replica set object. You have essentially...
Oh, so you're just saying not things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to roll these things up into the federated replica set status. You'd still have to query the underlying clusters for it.
Well, not necessarily the underlying clusters. You could query the federation for the set of replica sets in the underlying clusters, which underpin the federated replica set. In the same way that in the Kubernetes API, you can query the Kubernetes API to get the list of pods that underpin a given replica set, but you don't get that in the same API response. You don't say, tell me the status of this replica set, and part of its status is these are the pods and this is their liveness probe status, etc. You have to do a separate request to get those pods and find out what their status is. And so the initial proposal for the read access to objects proposal that we've put in is consistent with the Kubernetes approach to this situation. Namely, that you can get the status of the federated replica set, which would tell you what the total number of replicas are, how many of them are running, how many of them are not, etc. But if you wanted to find how many were in each cluster and what their status was, you would do a separate API call to the federated API to say, give me all of the replica sets in the underlying clusters that match this federated replica set.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
One of the differences here is that in case of Kubernetes, for example, replica set, the replica set controller doesn't actively track the pods, as in the pod spec, other than actually looking at the number of pods itself, as in whether the pod is dead or not, which is one of the reasons why it doesn't show the status in the replica set, which is in contrast to what we do in Federation. We actually actively track the replica set objects, spec to spec comparison, and it might actually make sense in Federation to show the status actively because we actively track the objects.
I'm not sure that I quite understood that. So in Kubernetes, we do that the Kubernetes replica set controller of how many scheduled pods there are and reflects that in the status of the replica set.
Correct. But that's it. It doesn't actually track the spec of the object or anything. As in, if somebody goes and modifies the pod spec for one of the pods created by the replica set, the controller actually doesn't do anything. as
Yes.
opposed to what happens in Federation, where if you go to one of the underlying clusters and change something in the underlying replica set, Federation tries to reconcile it back.
Yes, I see what you're saying. But that doesn't go all the way down to the pods, because the cluster itself will not replace.
Right.
Pods
So I'm
that
not.
create-
Right. I'm not saying we should show the status of the pods in the federated replica set. I'm saying it might be useful to show the status of the underlying replica sets in the federated replica set.
I guess I understand what you're saying. Yeah. There is a difference there, and the question is whether we surface that in the status. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think we should, probably have all of these conversations in that design document review, rather than necessarily dig into them too much here. Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a decent amount of stuff that people have added to 1.8. At this point, we just certainly don't have enough time to really, I think, go through them in detail and do any sort of prioritization or assignment. So maybe next week we can go through in more detail and plan to spend quite a bit of time looking at the features. People can add more things this week if they have things that they didn't finish in 1.7 that they want to get in, or new things for 1.8, and then we can go through and get a sense of whether this is a reasonable set of tasks that we can expect to get done in the 1.8 timeframe, add owners and reviewers and designers and these sorts of things. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't dwell too much on the size of the backlog, but it has gotten much larger since 1.7. So I know we have a lot of PRs that should kind of fall into place early in the cycle, that we've kind of at least agreed on.
Mm-hmm.
They're like almost LGTM. So my expectation is that the backlog should reduce.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a good trend. And now there's a lot more stuff in now. So I think we'll want to reprioritize across now and backlog. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice, get a sense of what's going to happen first.
Yep. And so I think the tree is supposed to unfreeze as early as tomorrow, so we can start merging things. And definitely we want to take advantage of that and get as much stuff going early in the cycle.
Yeah.
And especially the backlog. Like if we can clear the backlog, then that leaves us cycles to actually tackle any of the new stuff.
That makes sense.
Yeah, my sort of thinking was, and I put a lot of that stuff in the backlog. I basically just moved things that didn't make it into 1.7 or previously and pushed them into backlog together with whatever else was there. My thinking was that most of those that are currently reflected in backlog, and I think there's 6 of them, almost all of them should be able to merge in the next few weeks, like before the end of June, before the release of 1.7. I mean, they obviously won't be in the 1.7, but they should be in head by then, so that now actually reflects the work that we will do starting July 1.
Okay.
And the other comment is the email I sent out recently was a proposal that we try and get all of the stuff that we want to work on in 1.8 into the spreadsheet essentially by today, so that we can prioritize and actually get working on that in June at the latest. Are we wanting to push that out by another week? So give people another week to put things in there?
I mean, we don't necessarily need another week to put things in there, but we don't really have enough time to do a reasonable prioritization today, I think. We have 12 more minutes in this meeting.
Yeah, the proposal was to prioritize by the next meeting, essentially, yeah. So a week to put stuff in there, a week to prioritize, and then allocate stuff so we can get going towards the end of June. Is there any organization that is significantly interested in having items on this list that has not captured at least a first pass at what it would like to work on in 1.8 yet? Or are we mostly covered? It looks like Red Hat, Google, Huawei have their stuff in there. Is that true?
Yep, I think so.
So it sounds like we're on track. Okay, cool. So, next week, I guess we can rank and prioritize these things and kick stuff out that we don't think we can get to.
In that case, is there anything else, or can we end 11 minutes early?
I had a question, and I dropped an email to some of you guys a few minutes ago, and we may or may not be able to discuss this here, but I heard that there was a solution being proposed for multi-cluster management. And this is, the eBay guys mentioned to me that Google had mentioned such a thing. Is anybody able to talk about that here?
I don't know anything about what the eBay guys would have spoken to.
They mentioned Mike Rubin and some other people on the Federation team. The context of the question is that they have kind of adopted Federation across the board, across their company, and they're rolling it out as we speak, I believe, across all their data centers, federating them. And they were just a bit concerned that there might be some, alternative pursued by Google, and that they might be heading down the wrong path. But if you know nothing about it, then, I mean, I certainly know nothing about it, then it sounds like they may just have got a confused message from somewhere. But maybe if there is such a publicly visible taken by Google, maybe you could just and where it fits in here, because we should put I guess a clear message out to the community. There are quite a lot of companies. I mean, Red Hat is an example of putting a lot of effort into the Federation project for their products, and I guess we should make sure that we're clear how it relates to any alternative efforts being undertaken.
I would second that request. But also, Quinn,
I think
to hear more about eBay. Sorry, go ahead.
On any of the customers, I think, Quentin, you walked in when Maru was going through his list of what they've heard from customers in terms of like schedule list propagation of workload types. What was the other one? Federated preferences. I mean, these are all discussions we have as well with other customers. Now, in the case of eBay, nothing rings to my mind specifically. But yeah, I guess we have our own prioritization of stuff we would like to work on. None of these, I don't think there's anything to surface here in the spreadsheet at this time. Yeah, I mean, we're planning to be here next week to help prioritize the efforts that are currently on the spreadsheet.
Can I make a request? Sorry, go ahead.
And I was just going to clarify. So I mean, it's totally fine for any company, Google included, to be working on stuff that is not going to be open sourced, or that might be part of a proprietary product, GKE or whatever. But I guess is what you're referring to are the things that Google is working on that are going to be part of the open source Federation product? Are they sheet or going to be or not?
I missed the verb.
No, what I'm saying is the things that are going to go into open source Kubernetes Federation, would like to work on, are they reflected in the spreadsheet, or are there things that you're planning to work on that are going to be open source but not reflected in the spreadsheet?
Oh, no, everything that's in the spreadsheet is what we plan on working for open source.
Okay. But if I understood your previous comment correctly, there is other stuff that is not on the spreadsheet that you're working on that will, I guess, based on what you've said, not be open sourced.
I can't comment to that.
I understand.
I mean, I mean, we have a large working groups, cross SIG working groups, trying to tackle different problems that are related between multi-cluster and between networking. Some of them overlay with other GCP efforts. So I mean, there's a lot going on. We have to draw the line somewhere, and if there's some customers who don't necessarily see where that line is and echo these concerns, I can't always fully clarify for the purposes of the SIG where that line is drawn.
That makes sense. Now I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Okay. I guess, is there anything else, or can we end 5 minutes early?
Sounds good.
Going once.
I do actually have a request. So Quentin, you mentioned that eBay is actually rolling out Federation everywhere. Not necessarily right now, but I would be very interested in hearing more about how they're using it. I'm kind of curious. To my mind, I wouldn't necessarily want to deploy Federation production, so I'm curious how they're doing it and what their rationale for doing it is, if that's something you can share.
Sure. I can actually ask them to attend this meeting and present that to the group. I wouldn't want to speak on their behalf. My understanding, and I don't think they would mind me talking about this here, is that they've done considerable work internally, which they haven't necessarily open sourced all of it. They have at least philosophically adopted Federation as their way of managing the reasonably large number of clusters that they have. Precisely what they've done to make it grade at this point, I don't know. But they actually asked to have a meeting with me and a bunch of the engineers. In fact, I think it is this afternoon, where they want to become more actively involved in the open source part of this project as well. So you can imagine them joining us shortly. And yeah, they should be able to give more detail themselves.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you have an opportunity to relay to them, they would strengthen their position if they could reflect back whatever work they have internally, so that it gives a better sense of direction, both to the SIG, but to other companies who would want to adopt Federation. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have had that conversation with them already, and they apologize for not having been more actively involved here. I think it's basically been driven by very, very tight deadlines on their side, and they just haven't had the cycles to be involved in this group. They just have to get their own stuff out. But they are aware that this is not an ideal situation, and I believe that they are trying to address that by being more actively involved here in the coming weeks.
Cool.
All right, great.
All right.
Cool.
Have a good week, everyone.
I'll be out next week, so I'll see you guys in 2 weeks' time.
All right. Have a nice trip or vacation or whatever.
Yeah, America's Cup in Bermuda.
Ooh, okay, that sounds fun. All right, cheers.
Yeah. Bye-bye.